Lauren, since you're joining us for the first time, you're there at the event. What's been getting the most buzz on the ground there?
I would say that the iPhones are certainly getting the most buzz. It's true that we have entered an era where Apple is focusing more and more on services, which is a growing business for the company. And of course, sales of the iPhone have slowed. But I think when people come to the fall hardware event, they're still most interested in seeing whether or not Apple is going to be able to push the phones forward in some way, innovate in some way. And so I think there's been a lot of focus on iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max.
Tom, compared to previous events from Apple, and given the fact that it is shifting, it's trying to move beyond iPhone, really focus on leveraging the installed base, what did you think of this event?
So I definitely feel like going into the event, this was the lowest expectations we've had for an iPhone event, most likely ever. And I think it's part of their shift away from iPhones, which were 60% of their sales last fiscal year, to more services. So again, I think the $499 price point is more significant than any of the specs on the new iPhones. I do think, though, that working in the company's favor is this sense of very low expectations for the iPhone, and you have a patient investor base watching them transition away from the iPhone into services. And then lastly, I think that the threat of tariffs raising price of next year, even though next year should have 5G, which could be a catalyst for unit sales, could result in better than expected unit sales for the 11.
Tom, let's go to the $499 price point for the Apple TV Plus service. Roku's down a lot, Netflix is down a little bit. Do those two moves make sense to you in response?
They're actually, I would argue they're inverted. So if you think at the subscription video on demand,
Netflix should be down.
Roku should be up and Netflix should be down a lot more. So the fact that Apple, when is the last time, or when have you ever been able to say that the Apple product or service is the least expensive of anything? And I think the answer is never. So the fact that they're pricing their subscription video on demand service at $499, $1 below, for example, Disney's Hulu, suggests that Apple intends to take a lot of share here, and they're just getting started. For Roku, they're the only platform that lets you have essentially everybody. Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Amazon. So I think that this is a huge benefit for Roku. The net negative is that if you have an Apple device, you'll get the service for free. But on a relative basis, they don't sell very many Apple TVs, especially versus iPhones and iPads. So I think Roku should be trading higher on the news, not lower.
Steve, the fact that Apple's actually trading fractionally higher now, I mean, it started the day in the red.
Right.
You tend to see these Apple events. It's one of those situations where we get the news and the stock gets sold off. What does that tell you, the fact that we're seeing the inverse happen here?
I think to Tom's point, it's the gift of low expectations. Everyone knows that that's what usually happens with Apple. So it's the reverse of basically what we've seen historically to be the case. And you've also had the headwinds from China tariffs just battering the stock for months now. But it does have a technical problem when you look at the stock. It's got to overtake these resistance levels, 215, then 233. So there's two major mountains to get to Tom's point of 270. I'm a hoper right now. I am a believer in the product, but I am a hoper in the stock move.
Lauren, what was new on the wearables front today?
On the wearables front, there was a new Apple Watch, as had been expected, the Apple Watch Series 5. No major design overhauls and really no major changes. It looks pretty much the same. You can get it in some new casings. They introduced a new kind of display that offers an always-on display, so you don't have to like flick your wrist up all the time to see the time and that sort of thing. But one persistent rumor that was floating around before the event was that Apple would finally introduce something like sleep tracking, which is something that its competitors offer in wearables. We didn't hear anything about that today. It is very difficult, from what I understand, to get accurate sleep tracking analyses from the wrist. It could be something that Apple didn't feel it was ready for. It could be indicative of the fact that its battery life still isn't really all that great, and sleep tracking happens overnight when most people are charging the watch. I mean, wearables is a very important business for Apple. It's growing. According to a lot of reports, it is #1 globally in the wearables market. It tends to not give numbers on that because it bundles it in with AirPods and other things. But it is an important business. But at the end of the day, it's an accessory for iPhone, and it's something that keeps people locked into Apple's ecosystem, which is what I imagine the company is most focused on right now.
Yeah. Well, a lot of headlines coming out of that event today. Lauren Goode and Tom Forte, thank you for joining us to break some of them down.